Welcome to the Anti-Architect Podcast. I am your host, Christian Giordano. As president and owner of the architecture and design firm Mancini Duffy, I am driven by a quest for learning and radically changing the architecture industry through tech-first innovation. With this podcast, I am hoping to improve the industry that I am so passionate about by taking a critical look at how architects work with their clients and, in turn, how our clients view us. It is my goal to showcase all of these experiences, good and bad. Was it the architect or the client or somewhere in between? I aim to bring my audience new voices from around our industry, interesting people with diverse backgrounds. Through shared experiences, stories, and projects, my hope is that we can improve our profession. Hello, Anti-Architect Podcast listeners. I'm excited to have Jean Chandler, IIDA, as my guest here on the Anti-Architect Podcast. Jean is an extraordinarily creative and innovative interior designer with a passion for understanding the impact design has on productivity and the success of a business. Jean is way more than a workplace interior designer. She is a hands-on designer, as you will hear. She purchased a 1967 Ford Falcon club wagon, restored it herself, and she moved into a garage and built a wooden loft around it so they could live together. We'll get into that in a bit. As the design director of the New York office of Vocon, Jean excels at working closely with organizations with strong brands who desire to celebrate it through a sense of place. She has worked with some of the coolest brands throughout her 17-plus year career: the NBA, Google, Nickelodeon, Dentsu Aegis, Barclays, Bloomberg, the Citadel, and BBC. Oh, and also the Langham Hotel. Jean has also established a community called Womanufacture. Hopefully I said that correctly. I'm going to screw that up several times today, which is a workshop for women in New York City, where she inspires women to learn, make, and build anything from crafts to bookcases and beyond. Jean, thank you for agreeing to be on the podcast. It's an honor to have you here and have you tell your story.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So let's get right into it. What annoys you about working with architects?
I'll start off by saying I admire architecture the most out of all the arts, obviously, or I wouldn't be here. In my own pursuit of my career and my education, I found myself really chasing the topic of architecture, but always stopping just short of, I guess, that kind of Goliath that it is. And I prefer to kind of live around the edges of it. And I feel like I've found myself as a good pair. Sure. To architecture and architects. And I'm always kind of asking the why around it. My experience in working with architects is, and this is what makes architects, prevalent and strong, is there's always this one kind of grand solution, or there's always this desire to coalesce everything together and really organize it in one really prominent way.
Sure.
And that's the part that sort of bothers me a little bit, because I kind of enjoy living in the problem solving piece of things. And I enjoy kind of checking reality against my idea of what reality is. And sometimes with architecture, I feel like it can create, just by design, this holistic, point of view that isn't actually real.
Okay. I can see that.
So it's a little bit of a devil's advocate kind of rebel moment, but I would say that's the one thing that challenges
Great
me
answer.
continuously about the whole architecture world.
Great answer. So our audience would love to get to know you a little bit better. Can you tell us a little bit about growing up in Michigan?
Sure.
And about your childhood?
Absolutely. It's always fun to, when people are like, where are you from? It's always fun to kind of describe it. When I meet someone who I say I'm from Upper Michigan and they go, oh, wow. And they actually know where it is. I always feel really special because it's Not a lot of people know much about it. I think overall, the population of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan is like less than 3% of the total state.
Oh, really? Okay.
And the roads are really bad, and it snows a lot.
Where's Kalamazoo? Is that in the lower or the upper?
That's in the lower part.
It is, okay. All
right. So when you grow up in Upper Michigan, you call people from below the Mackinac Bridge, you call them trolls because they live under the bridge.
That's funny.
And they call us Yoopers because it's UP, Upper Peninsula.
Okay.
It's basically a mix of like Canada and Kentucky. I think that probably speaks to it well.
Definitely.
Yeah. There was a lot of like homemade, DIY before DIY was a thing. There was, as I was growing up and really finding my interest in design, no one pays for design up there. You get free stuff and you hack it together and you build something that's good enough.
Okay.
You don't pay someone else to think about a design for you. You design based off of what you have access to. And that's who I grew up with, my family, people around me in my neighborhood. It was always fun working with the neighborhoods in the city, like, because the city would have ordinances around what building materials people could use. And it's always a challenge within the city limits. And I'm from a town called Iron Mountain. When I was there, it had like 12,000 people or so. It's now one of those kind of like suburban type areas.
Okay.
But yeah, it was a lot of nature, and my dad was a mechanic, so I know a lot about cars, and we rebuilt our own house when I was a kid. So I got stuck helping with all of that, which I really enjoyed.
Is that why you think you became a designer? Sort of all these?
I think so. Yeah. My grandfather worked for Henry Ford, putting cars together on the assembly line.
Cool.
And my mom's an artist in all sorts of medias, and my family's very musical. So those are the sorts of medias that came like super easy to me.
Okay.
And I really like the idea of, I knew that life was going to be hard work, and I wanted to make sure that I was doing something fun because I knew it was going to be happening all the time.
Sure. So I like to ask this question of guests with a design background. Can you describe your childhood home in detail? I mean, the fact that you helped rebuild it yourself, I would assume you could do that.
I could. Yeah. I mean, that's one of my favorite reads. I'm trying to remember the author, but it's called Poetics of Space. And it talks about that. It talks about the memories and character of your childhood home and how that affects your like psyche through the rest of your life. And yeah. Just the stair that led to the basement. And we rerouted the stair when we built an addition onto the house. I remember those details. All those details. Yeah, how that came around. Yeah, that's absolutely. Funny.
Yeah, we I know renovating my house, I know where every wire goes, everything, and it's kind of, I like knowing that about, a place I live, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel the same way.
So you describe your family as, mechanic experts. And the way that you look at design is similar. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited about systems. I think, everything moves in systems. Everything's sort of a machine at the end of the day. I think of my team at work as a machine. I think of a building as a machine for working, or a house as a machine for living. And it has dynamic components and static components. It has components that need to be switched out over time. I just like thinking about grouping functions and grouping aesthetic choices based on how the machine actually operates. Mm-hmm. I feel like you can get really into the nitty gritty with that on the programming side.
Sure.
You can also start to get into the nitty gritty on the finishing side as well. So I like to think about it that way.
Okay, I like that. And then, so when did you first come to New York City?
So I came to New York City in 2010.
Okay.
October 10th. So 10/10/2010. I'd been wanting to move to New York for the longest time. I came here for the first time when I was 17 on a high school trip.
Oh, nice.
And I was like, I want to live here so bad. And it took a while, but I made the move. I made it here, and it's just been like beyond my wildest dreams.
And where did you go to school?
So I went to an art school in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, called Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design.
Yep.
It's about a 600 person school. Really great, like hands-on experience, small classroom sizes, metal lab, wood lab, all sorts of space and attention from teachers. And it was 4 hours away from home. So I knew I wasn't going to get any surprise visits from my family, but I could still kind of get back there quickly in a day if I needed to.
Okay. And did you major in interior design? Or?
I did. The program was actually called Interior Architecture and Design. It was accredited. It was not accredited in design or architecture, but I did achieve a BFA. And had a little bit of the first year foundations year is a little bit more well-rounded, just, basic art sort of background, which I loved. I feel like that was the bridge I needed to really focus on making the decision to get into the architecture world. Got it.
Okay. And then so tell us about finding your first job and where you worked.
Yeah, for sure. So when I left Milwaukee, I was working for a design build firm. It was a family-owned business. They became very successful very quickly. I was given a lot of responsibility at a very young age and enjoyed all of it. My clients, however, weren't very, they wouldn't let me challenge them.
Okay.
And I just remember time after time bringing great materials or really exciting digital element to the table and them saying, I think this is a little bit too progressive for our client base. And so I finally decided, if I really want to grow my career, I have to go to New York City. So I left right on after surviving that economic crash in 2008. A bunch of people were laid off from my firm. My firm sort of treated me like a young member of their family. They sat me down. Really not a good idea to leave right now. Are you sure you want to do this? We really highly suggest that you don't. And I did, because it was just time.
Okay.
And when I landed here, it was really hard to find work.
I'm sure.
Major part of that was having this very conservative work that I was doing in the Midwest as my portfolio and not able to really find at that point firms that were willing to take a risk on someone like me. So I ended up getting together with Aerotech and joined as one of their consultants. And I worked at Perkins and Eastman for a month with Maureen. And then the project I was working on was done. So I had gotten released back out into the pond again. And then I got pulled into Ted Moodis and I was working on several projects there. I remember just being so grateful to have a little cup on my desk with a pen and a scale. I just remember being like, oh, wow, I don't ever want to take this for granted again. Sure. The ability to actually do this for a living.
Was that with Aerotech or that was direct working for Moodis?
So I was with Aerotech as an employee there. And then after a few months, they were like, we just want you to come work here.
Oh, that's great.
So I got to join the crew on that side and work with Jacqueline and all the others for a couple years. And that was really my first get my feet wet in New York City, moment in design.
So how did you know that you wanted to, as a designer early on, how did you know that the clients weren't right for you, that you wanted to kind of do more and push the envelope in a sense?
It's just this feeling I had inside. I was utilized a lot as an example because I was a millennial technically.
Okay.
And a lot of our clients were credit unions and banks. And their customers and members were literally dying. They were very old people. And they're saying, how do we get the younger market? And my boss would kind of put me in front of them and be like, she's the younger market.
That's
Listen
smart.
to her. And I would talk about it and I feel like it would gain some traction. But when I actually tried to implement it, there was just so much pushback and lack of belief. And one of the actual projects that I got to be the most progressive on is a credit union in my hometown, which was really funny because even in Milwaukee, they're like, oh, it's a small little town. It's way up in the woods. And I was like, these are my people. And they actually let me be the most progressive out of any client. And I truly believe it's because they knew I was coming from there. That was my town. And their customers were my friends and my family. So, it became clear that I wasn't going to be able to get it there.
Got it. Okay. So what is I was reading something about what does push the envelope mean to you? Because people use that a lot. I'm just curious what it means to you.
I like to have my like spidey senses out. One of the reasons I love living in New York so much is this coast is where it all happens. Like things hit here first. Even when I was working in the Midwest, I was like on every blog possible on a daily basis, trying to pick up trends. And I feel like you can really have a finger on the pulse here. And I think it's our responsibility as designers to push the envelope, to push people to new ways of thinking, new ways of designing, new ways of being sustainable. And I think that we have to create that momentum and we have to sustain that momentum or the industry doesn't change.
Right.
Right. So, it's almost like this inner drive that I have, that I've always had, to stay like on the shoulder of the wave.
Sure. So in 2010, you move here, you take the leap, you decide, hey, that's it. I'm coming to New York City. I don't care. Recession, no recession. You said you worked with Aerotech and kind of bounced around with them. But I read that you also worked at a bar, at a David Rockwell designed bar. So which I love that. So, and there's a lot to be learned from that type of interaction with experience. So just tell us quickly about that.
Sure. I actually paid my way through college working in the service industry. I worked in restaurants and I worked in hotels. I love working in hotels. Like to this day, I feel like the experience that I got has been more valuable than most experiences that I've learned with my education, to be honest, because it's really all about working with people and creating a space for people, which I feel like I do every day with my clients. So I worked through college, and then as I was saving up money to leave to New York, I also worked in a hotel, and I got this really great phrase in one of the training seminars that's like there's a 10-foot and a 5-foot rule when you're in a hotel, and if someone's 10 feet, if you're 10 feet away from a guest, you have to acknowledge them visually.
Okay. And
if you're 5 feet away from a guest, you need to verbally acknowledge them. Right. So there's just this sense of awareness and just kind of humility. So I love using that. I use that every day. I use it out on the street. I use it with my clients. But when I moved to New York and I wasn't getting architecture work and I was watching my debit card just get swiped right the second you leave your house in New York, it's like cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. And I was like, man, I need to get a job until I can get a job. And I thought, well, if I'm going to work in the industry, I want to be inspired by the environment I'm in. And I'm in New York City, so I have access to all of these really beautiful venues that were designed, by architects that I love and admire. So I went to a few with some resumes, and the Inc. 48 Hotel on the West Side was one of them. And I did my resume all like graphic design. I had a really nice, plastic case on it, and it made an impression with the manager, and they called me back.
Oh, nice.
And I started working there. I didn't really have any Manhattan bartending experience. And I asked my manager, a while after that, like why he took a chance on me. And he's like, well, your resume just looked really organized. So I thought you'd be like a really organized person. And we need that around here. He's like, I could teach you to bartend. So yeah, it was wonderful working in that space.
I'm sure. And I love that about the 5 and the 5-foot and 10-foot rule. And if you read, sort of about Steve Jobs, he modeled Apple actually after the Four Seasons Hotel and Isidore Sharp, who created the Four Seasons, and this whole idea of customer service, right? That you had to know people's name even before they arrived at the hotel to greet them. And it was always a sequential greeting throughout, and that you were acknowledged and all this sort of stuff. And that kind of thing is fascinating to me. When more people should do that and really pay attention to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're at Ted Moodis, and where do you go from there?
So from Ted Moodis, I went back to Perkins Eastman, actually.
Oh.
So I had been chatting with Maureen. Another opportunity came up with them. She remembered working with me for even a short amount of time. And, they made an offer, and I went on over there.
Okay. And when do you end up at Studios?
So Studios happened. I went to Callison for a little bit to try to help them get a workplace studio off the ground. And then Studios happened maybe like 3 or 4 years later. So I worked with a recruiter who'd been contacting me.
Okay.
It was kind of bothersome. I was like, oh, stop calling me, stop bothering me at work. And then they finally name dropped who they were representing. And I was like, well, why didn't you just tell me that in the first place? Now we can talk. It was just a really great opportunity to utilize everything I've learned up to that point, and bring it to a highly competitive environment and work with some like supercharged, super talented individuals that taught me a lot. And to work on some projects that actually let me feel like I could exercise those progressive demons with the clients.
So along the way, you're really figuring out sort of your voice in workplace design, and it's become, your concentration. So, and now you're the design director at Vocon. What is it about workplace design that you enjoy? And then why do you think you were drawn to that?
I was kind of just given it, as one of my first opportunities, like, we're going to design this workplace for these folks who work at a bank. And I loved just meeting every single person. I love talking about their customers and where they were coming from. We got to do these really cool geo maps and, help the marketing team locate it on the right corner. And it really became a place that gets integrated into people's lives, weekly, however often people used to go to the bank, right? And I remember too, like, oh, pretty soon you're going to be able to bank from your phone completely. That'll never happen. So I just loved that notion of like meeting a whole new group of people every time and seeing what makes that business click and seeing what their troubles were and trying to help them solve them. And as I continued on in my career and started working with larger and larger organizations or really specialty organizations, that's what I love about it the most is like you get to pop open the hood every time and learn about how their machine works, right? And then the space that you're building and accommodating them in, it has to really work and jive with what their business goals are. Yeah. So that is the part of the challenge that I enjoy the most. And then the placemaking side of it is really just bringing around that sensibility of who they are and their aspirations of who they want to be and how to give people like the space within that place to imagine themselves being better, greater, smarter, faster, however that works out for them. Yeah, for sure. And you get access to a lot of decision makers and people at the heads of companies that, most people only dream of talking to. And other than the fact that, okay, that, the first time that you're going to meet them is sort of interesting. After that, they're a client and you have more work to do than they do, right? I mean, you've got to present to them and they've got to make decisions. Right. And they're just like any other person at that point. And it's really, that's one of the things I love about this profession is that you do meet so many interesting people and you see, as you said, sort of under the hood of every company. And they're similar in some ways. They're all different in some ways. Everyone's trying to achieve something else. They treat their people differently. And you get to kind of figure out what you enjoy about all that stuff. It's a very, very fascinating aspect of what we do. Yeah, it's kind of nice to show up on site with Adam Silver and kind of help him locate where he wants his towel bar in his bathroom. And, can we move the light switch a little bit over this way? Because I just feel like it's less awkward. Absolutely, Adam. Or telling someone like we had to tell Bob Iger once at Disney, no, we can't make any more changes because everything is, you're going to throw off the schedule. And he said, okay, I guess that we're not making any more changes. So it's a powerful moment right there. That's right. So we need to talk about your house. Can you tell us a little bit about the significance of the van? Sure. I was researching buying. So I grew up with vans. My family, my dad always had a van. We would it was not cute. Like we would sleep in it in like the parking lot if we were going on a trip somewhere instead of getting a hotel. And I was always so frustrated by it and embarrassed. And then I reached a certain age and I was like, man, what would be a good idea? A van that I could drive around and sleep in. So I thought, well, if I'm going to do it, I want to do it in style. And this was years and years ago. Like I wouldn't say van life wasn't around, but it was around, but it wasn't on the front page of the paper and magazines like it is now. But I really love nature. Living in the city is very inspiring. I obviously am here for my work, for my clients to get energized. But just growing up where I did, being in nature is a huge part of my life. And not having a vehicle to access that was problematic. And I did want to be able to just go up into the woods and just unplug and be there for a few days. So I was like, let me get this van. And I searched for quite a while and I didn't end up finding the one I want. And then I kind of gave up. And then I was on Instagram one night and I saw a picture of it and it said for sale, 1967 Ford, with like a pop top on it. And I was like, oh my gosh. And the posting was already like 5 weeks old. So I was like, there's no way this is available. So I'm like feverishly messaging this person. Is this still available? Yes, it is. Call me tomorrow. So I ended up flying out there to Los Angeles to see it. I was in San Francisco for work, so I just got a little junker plane. I looked at it. I was like, I'll buy it. And then I had my cousin who lives down in San Diego at the time drive up and make the purchase for me so that I made sure that I could, capitalize on it. And she helped me out with that. And then I flew out to San Diego and drove it back here. Which I would never do again, understanding now how many problems that particular engine has.
I'm sure.
But when you don't know any better, you just get carried on this like wave of grace all the way.
That's an amazing trip, though.
Yeah, it was super fun. I brought my nephew with me. It was the first time he had seen the Pacific.
Okay.
So, and then I flew him back to fix all my electrical wires a few months later. And then I said, here, now you see the Atlantic Ocean. So I gave you both. You have
that's great.
Both sides.
That's something I keep telling my wife. I keep threatening that I'm going to take my 2 girls and it's just going to be the 3 of us and we're going to go across country, but we're going to rent a convertible. That's I've decided we're going to rent a convertible and just drive across country.
That might get old.
Yeah, it might. Yeah, I know. Convertibles really aren't that great. So that's awesome. So tell me a little bit about, kind of finding the space to park your van.
Sure. Yeah, I went and I bought it and I brought it back and I was like, man, where am I going to put this thing? And it's, I'll just get a garage. It's going to be like $200 a month or something. And it ended up like almost $500 because it's a large vehicle. So then it lived under the BQE for a moment. And I was like, I really need to find a place to park this thing. And I remember talking to my brother about it. And he's like, why don't you just find a like cool studio apartment that has like a garage door? And I'm like, you're insane. Like, I'm sure there's places like that, but I can't afford them. Right. I'm not going to find one. And so I really tried to like not speak that negativity. Like I really spent weeks just being like, I could find one though. And
possible.
Yeah. And I met up with a broker out in Bushwick because I was like, that's kind of the area where that might happen. And I looked at a bunch of lofts with him and I was just, he's like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I'm not seeing what I need. And he's like, what do you want? And I showed him the picture of the van and he's like, come with me. And we drove across the neighborhood and there it was under construction. Okay. Like just exposed concrete brick on the inside. Walls were studded in, no drywall. He's like, now it's not done yet. And I'm like, I'll take it.
That's great.
And he's like trying to explain to me that it's going to feel a little bit more, nice. And I'm like, I'm in the business. I already see it. I'm putting this here. I'm putting this here. So I bothered him every single day until he finally took all my money. And it's a rental. So I fought for it. But yeah,
and that's where you live now?
It's been amazing. Yeah, I'm still
that's
there.
Awesome.
It's a ground level garage with a big glass door. It's got a 14-foot ceiling. So I put a loft up over the top of the van. Her name's Bellflower. She lives in there with me. She's a spare bedroom if people come
That's
visit.
Perfect. Yeah.
So it's great. I mean, I've always wanted to like build out a loft. I just couldn't get my, stuff together earlier in my life. So, yeah, it's been great. It's been great to share the space with people who do breath work, friends of mine, meditation. It's been an exciting,
nice,
a little oasis in Brooklyn.
And you can travel with it, which is even better.
Absolutely.
Yeah, especially during COVID. So that,
yeah,
I'm sure that was huge. So tell me a little bit about Womanufacture.
For sure. So I guess, growing up in the UP, very practically minded place, whether you were a boy or a girl or whoever, you did work that you needed to do to get things done. And I found as I kind of moved on with my life that not a lot of other girls or women identifying people like got to live that way. And I realized that it was very special to like be able to be given an opportunity to work with tools or to build something for oneself or to fix the closet door that fell off the wheel instead of having to worry about someone else doing that. You take the initiative to do it yourself. And I started to see that kind of characteristic or trait play out for me in my professional world. And I started to see it maybe missing in some other, women and women identifying persons, that you actually don't have to ask permission. You can actually get in there and start working with your hands. So I really wanted to start a program, and I looked into all of the insurances and equipment and rentals. I thought, what would be easier for me is to create these really bespoke workshop experiences that I partner with other agencies, and we do it together. And I kind of bring the audience, and they kind of pull back the sheet and show us about, how things work. And we did one down at the Classic Car Club most recently. We got to go under the hood of all these engines.
Oh, that's cool.
And just bringing a group of women from all different backgrounds. We did a sawmilling one up in Kingston. So we cut a tree down, we cut it into boards from someone's yard, which then got donated to this really great New York Heartwoods company that we were partnering with. And they make really beautiful furniture out of this urban fell lumber. So we got to be a part of that like whole closed loop experience.
Sure.
And it's just really fulfilling. It's really helpful. One of my friends who's a movie director at the car workshop, we're watching this video about how an internal combustion engine works. And she's like, this whole time I've been putting gas in my car, and I had no idea that it was like thousands of mini explosions every second going on. And I was like, yeah. She's like, that's cool. I'm like, that's cool.
Yeah.
So I feel like, that could help her in her work. Like that could help her understand. Maybe she's going to put some sort of cool car chase in one of her films now. Like, I don't know. But it really has been a really fulfilling way to kind of reach out and give back that permission to do and make and build.
That's extraordinary. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's great. I love the architecture profession. There are so many wonderful people, so many interesting, innovative, and smart folks. And we get access to people that most never even have an opportunity to meet in person. I have worked with Bob Iger, CEO of Disney, Jamie Dimon, CEO of JP Morgan Chase, John Foley, founder of Peloton, and many more legends. There is another aspect of architects that fascinates me. How do clients view us? How do they work with us? Those that work with architects either have a wonderful experience or a pretty bad one. Let's continue to listen to the lessons they've learned. And now back to the episode. So part of what we do here is take a critical look at how architects work with how architects and designers work with their clients, and the process of how we deliver projects. You have a unique perspective, working sort of as a pure interior workplace designer in the last few years. So, in your opinion, what do architects do well, and what do they do wrong, and what's broken with the process?
I just think the process is not very modern. It seems to me that all sorts of services and product deliveries out there in the world today are taking advantage of, reinventing themselves. And the language of our contracts can be stifling.
Sure.
The process that we sort of force all clients to go through doesn't always make sense. I think there's a lot more opportunity for creativity in the process. And of course, it all has to come down to dollars and cents. So, as a service industry where we're really billing per hour, it's definitely a fine balance that's required. But I do think like our industry definitely needs an overhaul. It needs to feel more approachable. It needs to collaborate more with itself, similar to what you're doing, which I think is so fantastic. And I think that's crucial.
Oh, thank you.
Because we all succeed together, or we all kind of antiquate together.
Yeah, no, I agree. And having doing this podcast now for a while, it's, people are very open to this conversation and this idea that, yes, we're competitors, but in the end, who cares, right? We all want to move the profession forward in some way. So I guess for you as, I'll pose this question to you as the interior designer, right? Because I know we get that this a little bit here is, how do architects and interior designers specifically communicate better? Because I can say that here we'll sometimes have this sort of butting of heads of the interiors versus the architects, right? How do we kind of get past that?
I mean, in my experiences with this, because I've been on both sides of the coin. I've been an interiors person in the interiors heavy firm, and I've been the interiors person in the architect heavy firm.
Right.
And I believe the best way is for everyone to just ask more questions. There's so much that we don't know and that we can learn from each other, and asking questions versus forcing solutions. It really disarms people, and it gives people the opportunity to explain, the thinking behind their actions or their suggestions. And I have found that it creates a more collaborative environment when you do that. And it's a way to kind of unlock any lock in any organization with any individual, regardless of what personality type they are, how much experience they have, is to just take a step back and question it. Like, why are we doing it that way?
Yeah.
And you might find that you agree. In some cases where I've never done it that way. I've always done it this way. This is what's more important. To just take a moment and really explore that together. Yeah,
I see here. It always like shocks me when I hear, the interior designer isn't getting along with the architect on the project. And I think, but we're all in the same company. Like, I don't understand
we need
this.
Each other.
Right. Exactly. And so what we've tried to do here is really kind of make sure that we're all working on each other's projects. Architects work on interiors jobs, interiors work on, because everyone brings a different perspective to the project.
Absolutely.
And it's a more well-rounded perspective anyway.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's always the best.
Where do you see, technology in the process and how it can help?
I'm waiting for it. It boggles my mind. Like, think about it a lot. I know, like, I don't have the resources at my hand to develop what I think maybe needs to be developed, but I'm ready and willing to use it when that happens for us. And I think it all kind of funnels back into what I was talking about earlier around this kind of old school, archaic way of doing things, of working with clients. I love the notion of being able to allow clients to kind of select through a digital process how they want to give us the information we need to do the job.
Right.
Ultimately, I think technology only enhances the ability of the designer. It doesn't replace the ability of the designer. If I were going to do 15 different test fits, it would take me quite a while. But if I could generate them based on a set of constraints quickly, I could use my skills, my eye, and my artistry to just select between really great options.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's where I see it going, and that's where I want it to go. But it is a little frustrating to be like living and breathing in this industry and not have the access to the development of those tools, just basically because I think of how the finances break down in our industry. Yeah,
in the end, because the project doesn't allow for any room for exploration into anything other than the project itself. So,
and more every day, it gets tighter and tighter.
Especially after COVID, it's kind of all compressed now even more. So we have a responsibility as designers to face climate change. And, I think we can lead this effort. How do you think, you as an interior designer can help take part in that task?
I have given up on my demands for new furniture, for branded design. I'm erring towards simplicity. If a client comes to me and says, I purchased really beautiful classic furniture about 5 years ago and it's still wonderful, I'm very excited to reuse that. Very much so. And it's all about being strategic, within the design and making sure that they feel their space has been refreshed and thoughtful. But my attitude around reusing things and kind of working against the supply chain problem with our contractors is like my new mission. That it feels really good to do those sorts of things. And that's more important to me than what it looks like in the photograph at the end.
Sure.
And that can go in many ways. And especially after COVID and thinking about modularity for clients that are saying, gosh, well, we don't know what we need.
Right.
Like, we don't know what we need. And I'm pretty sure in a year from now, it's not going to be right. Well, I went on this really wonderful kind of forestry trip with Triloc's workshop. And they talked about like the regeneration of a natural forest and carbon sinks, carbon allocation, timber framing, things like that. And they describe the shell and the foundation of a building as being 100-year investment. And then as you go down into the interior, it could be like a 6-month investment for some of our clients. And I think it's our responsibility as designers to create the inside as a 40+ year investment.
Yeah.
And so when we're working with some of our landlords right now, they kind of like that too, right? Because no one likes having to let a tenant go and then go through a bunch of TI and time to get another tenant in. It's a lose-lose situation. So, I really feel like things are going that way. And it's definitely been my inspiration for what materials I'm specifying, definitely trying to get wood in as much as possible.
Sure.
So yeah, I think it's just all about the circular conversation.
Yep. Yeah. We have some clients too that are very interested in reusing what they had. And that was never a conversation we would ever have had. It was always assumed you move, you throw everything out, and you start fresh.
Right.
Which never made sense to me because, when you move a house, your own personal house, you don't throw everything out and start over every time.
Just costs more.
Yeah,
it costs more to save things.
Yeah.
And until we continue to do it and normalize it, like the cost factor won't reduce.
Right.
Because we drive that market.
Right.
As designers and specifiers.
Yeah, agreed. So kind of bringing it all back around, if you had to do it differently as far as your career is concerned, what might you have changed?
I probably would have left Wisconsin and come to New York to go to school. Okay. It was just like, I was way too afraid to do that. I had a lot of fear around it. I honestly don't know, like, if that would have changed my career. Right. I think it would have just got me, into where I wanted to be sooner. But no, it's been a wonderful journey and I'm so grateful. I feel like I'm like always in good favor. Like it could have gone, a lot of people move to New York and they just don't make it. They don't stick around. And I have found that I've always had what I need to take care of myself. And I found a lot of like respect and kindness in this community. Yeah, for sure. And the relationships that we have with each other. I've really relied on those and I've asked for help many times, and many times help was just so freely and kindly given. So this community means a lot to me. I think we're all very keen and serious in what we're doing and we're competitive. But I also think that fundamentally, as New Yorkers in the design community, like we really do care about like lifting the whole experience for all of us.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
I definitely feel that.
Jean, thank you so much for being my guest here on the Anti-Architect podcast. And thanks for sharing your unique story and everything about you, which I find absolutely fascinating. So to read more, to see and read more about Jean, you can find her on her own website, as a matter of fact, jeanchandler.com. And for more about Womenufacture, it's www.womenufacture.com. So thank you again. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me.
Great.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, awesome.
Thank you.
All right.